Hello everyone and welcome to episode 7 of the Film Score podcast. Today I'm talking with composer Ros Gilman. Ros originally started out as a classically trained violinist from a very young age, but after an accident left him unable to fully play, he moved full-time to film scoring. Ros has since worked on many features, short films, and documentaries. We recorded this interview quite a while ago, very early in this endeavor, so the audio quality isn't quite as good as some subsequent episodes. In addition, we ran into a few technical difficulties and a very tight time frame within which to record this, so you'll notice that the episode is quite a bit shorter than most of my others. Nonetheless, still quite an enjoyable conversation. Now, as always, you can also check out my website, find me on various social media platforms at The Film Score for reviews, write-ups, discussions, and analysis on film music as well. Now, with all that out of the way, sit back and I hope you enjoy this episode. So thanks for coming on. I know that the rest of this week you were in Prague doing recording sessions, so busy week for you. So I'm glad you could make some time. I mean, how did that go? What were you recording?
So I came back from Prague, I think, just a couple of days ago, and we were recording for an animation called The Last Cloudweaver. It's by a London-based production company called Dragon the Animations. I've worked with them before on several occasions, actually, and we make a good team. So that was a very exciting project for me personally, because in Prague we recorded with the Prague Metropolitan Orchestras, and we had 64 players. So the room was full of musicians. So that was, for me personally, that was the largest lineup live musicians I've worked with of a professional orchestra that does a lot of film music and lots of soundtracks. I've worked with the Macedonian Symphonic Orchestra before. And they've done Think Like a Dog is the latest one they've done. But this time we went to Prague because the coronavirus, it was very difficult.
Yeah, I bet. That's so lucky though, because other people I've talked to and that I've seen, when they're composing and recording right now, they're either doing everything on their own or, they record a part, send it to somebody else who then records a part, and it's this piecemeal process everywhere. So having that opportunity right now is incredible.
Yes, that's what I thought. That's exactly what I thought. I was hoping we could make it happen somehow, and we did. And so we had to go through a couple of setbacks, and I really wanted to conduct. I always conduct my own sessions, so I really wanted to conduct the score myself. Because it seems like, unfortunately, things are starting to get worse. And I'm in the UK here in London, and the Czech Republic just got taken off the whitelist. So I would have to quarantine for, I think, 14 days if I hadn't left just a couple of days before. So yeah, that was, the window was just right.
Yeah, that couldn't have worked out better for you. At least in some ways it's a little easier in Europe because you have all these different countries that are so much easier to get to.
Yes, absolutely. And each of them has their own regulations in terms of social distancing, and some are not quite as badly hit, I suppose, as others. So I'm just hoping in the film industry, in the music industry, I'm hoping we'll get some degree of normality in the not too distant future.
I'm hoping so too. Can you tell me a little bit about the score in the film then?
Yeah, of course, yeah. So it's an animation, and it's about a dragon and a little girl. And the dragon teaches the girl how to weave clouds. And one of these special things for me for this project was the fact that it was silent. So there's no dialogue at all. So the music really plays a central role in telling the story. And the girl also weaves clouds with a flute. So very musical already. But I thought it's a lovely film. It's in the fantasy genre.
Very cool. So is that what your score is like then, a more orchestral fantasy score?
Absolutely, yes. Spot on. It's no limit really to imagination, and in the story itself and in the storytelling, it's very magical.
Growing up, I was always a huge fantasy fan, so I love being able to hear fantasy scores, but unfortunately I find, at least in the US, the genre in film isn't as popular. So I really miss not being able to hear a lot of new fantasy scores, so I'll be looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's coming.
Great. And, I mean, given that, was there any film composer or more classical composer that you listened to for inspiration on it? Or did you really just rely on your own creativity to create this?
Yeah, it's a good question. I usually try not to listen to other colleagues just before when I
Hmm.
start writing music. I don't want to sort of be influenced too much, but I do listen to a lot of music in between. So when I'm not writing, I do tend to listen. I'd say probably one of my generally greatest inspirations and the person who influenced me to start the life of a film composer is the legendary John Williams. I've never had the fortune of meeting him. He was nominated for the BAFTA series in London, and I was fortunate to be there as part of a BAFTA crew, but I don't think he flew in to his nomination. So I was hoping to, to maybe shake his hand, but it didn't happen. So yeah, John Williams. And for this particular score, I think, I like Desplat, Alexandre Desplat. When I was a student, I really liked Danny Elfman.
Well, I mean, he's great. He has that dark gothic whimsy that I don't think anyone even bothers trying. He did it so well, and especially like in the late '80s and '90s, that it's his.
Absolutely. I think he sort of really, this is his color, isn't it? If you want this, then
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
this is the
But what's interesting with him is I think he did God, I can't remember if it was a ballet or an opera,
all
maybe
right.
3 or 4 years ago. I
Yes,
can't remember the name, but I mean it was really good, and it was clearly him. It was really interesting hearing him in a completely different context, and not surprisingly, he did a great job.
yes, yes. I think it's for many film composers, as for myself as well. I think there is always the desire of writing film music on one side, which
Hmm.
is a very collaborative project. But of course, you're sort of bound by some of the structure and the storytelling and the story behind it. And on the other side, the autonomous, the standalone music. So I think many film composers, they really enjoy the writing on its own without the need to write for something. As a balance. I can understand this because it's just you can let your creativity flow without having to or be bound by certain constraints.
Yeah. You kind of took the opposite path almost of starting in classical training from a young age, going through these different conservatories and academies, and then, however many years later, then moving into film music. So, I mean, I think that's a really interesting path.
Thank you. Yes, in my life, it sort of was a bit of a sad accident that I had with my hand as a concert violinist that ultimately led me to write music for film. So like you said, I started out as a concert violinist when I was very little. And I remember my very first tiny violin that my mother brought. At the same time, I always loved film music and always enjoyed writing in my spare time. So
Hmm.
when my accident happened, it was an unfortunate time too. I had a string quartet, and then we just
Oh.
started playing national radio, national TV, and it was going well. And then that happened, and so I had to think about, do I continue doing music or not? And as you know, if you can't perform anymore, you can either write or conduct. So I applied at the University of Music in Vienna to do both. I got into first composing and then conducting, and with the ultimate goal again influenced by Joe Williams. I love Jurassic Park and all that. So like, yeah, I want to do that, and that's how I got into film composition. Really,
That's great. And I love hearing those stories of how people get into it. Not saying that I love yours because it has that tragic impetus,
mm-hmm.
but you took it in stride, and now you're here today being successful in it.
Well, I'm nowhere
Yeah,
there. Thank you. Yeah, I think
yeah.
whatever happens in life, you sort of need to try and see the upside. As a violinist, I've played in orchestras for many years, and naturally, that gives you a really good overview of the point of view of music from the inside. So sitting in the orchestra, and that really influenced me, and it helped me write music from a different perspective. You take a step back, and you've got the music sort of maybe still inside you, but not quite. You're not quite in the middle of it as a performer. So that was definitely a huge benefit for me to start writing and orchestrating my own things. And so I'm quite all right with the fact that I'm this path has has taken me where I am at the moment.
That's always how it goes, right? No one ever is on one straight path where there's no hindrance. There's always
Absolutely.
something, and the measure of someone is how they maneuver across them.
Ah,
Um,
very,
yeah,
very well put. Very well put. Success is how you get through the problems, and we don't know. I'm sure it's like many successful people, the problems they had. I'm sure, and just because they persevered and found a way out of it, that's why they are where they are today.
exactly. And so having the training in violin and piano, and then I know that you do a lot of classical guitar playing as well, and I'm sure a load of other instruments. Do you have one that's your favorite to play on? Both playing and composing.
I would probably say, Marcus, that the violin is sort of because I've just had a relationship with it for over 20 years. And when I could no longer play it, it was like losing an old friend.
Hmm.
And now that said, last year I was surprisingly able to come back and play it again. I even recorded a piece by Tchaikovsky, the Russian composer, which is on streaming and download. That was a great moment for me. And the violin is probably the strongest connection that I have to an instrument. But as a composer, I think the piano is, many composers call it the pocket orchestra. You don't have the colors, but you have the whole range. So it's like sort of a black and white sketch, and then you go and color it if you write for orchestra with the different colors of the instrument, the flutes and the strings and the trumpets and so on and so forth.
So is that often your process then when you're first composing for a film is, you're sitting down at the piano working things out and then building from there?
Yes. So the approach actually varies. Sometimes it's very intuitive. Sometimes I see the picture
Mm.
and I sit in front of the screen and then I just try things out in front of it. Sometimes I go right into the colors if there is no time. But for the cloud wheel, for example, that we spoke earlier, I actually had the time to sit down and I just took the time, I suppose, to sit down
Mm.
and write. And I had the main melody. Once I found this and the director was happy with it, that I just went into, I can even show you writing this morning, but this is sort of what it looks like. So I've got like a sketch here on this side, a piano sketch, and then I go into like a larger score, orchestrating
Mm.
it. I just feel sometimes that being in front of a screen can stifle your
Mm.
creativity. So same if you're writing on words or whatever you do, sometimes I feel like just turning off the screen and going to paper, just clearing your minds or even sitting down, closing your eyes. That sometimes is a really good way to let the creative connections form.
Interesting. I think that's a really profound point. Sometimes it's good to get all these other inputs we have every single day and just put them away and focus on what you're doing. I might give that a try because when I write for, my film music coverage or if I'm writing fiction, it's always in front of the computer. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not.
Yeah. I think it's probably just sometimes it's best to go directly and right in front of the computer or digitally. And other times you might feel that maybe, having pen and paper or maybe in your case, a typewriter. Do writers still sometimes use typewriters these days?
I think some people do. I don't know if people do it seriously or if they do it to kind of stand out and just be contrarian.
I think it's just probably sometimes you need a different approach. And yeah, maybe a typewriter is the next one for
Yeah,
me.
maybe. I've got to say, I was really happy to hear a few pieces of yours, both compositions on your own, and I think for film music also, that were acoustic or classical guitar based.
All right. Yes. You're probably talking about Dawn of Hope. That's a track we released on streaming a month or 2 months ago. Not don't quite remember. That was originally from a documentary, from a TV documentary called Paris is the Target, Paris est une cible. And it was about the Paris attacks, the terror attacks in, I think, 2015, that was, if I'm not
Mm.
mistaken. And they made a very interesting documentary about it, for which I was fortunate to write the music. And the director wanted to, like you said, a particular
Mm.
sound, the acoustic guitar. And so we wrote something and quite liked the track. So thought more people should hear it.
Yeah, I mean, and as I've seen, it's a fairly popular track of yours too, which years ago I used to play classic guitar. Like you with violin, I've always had a soft spot for it. It's just so underused across film music, so it's really nice to hear it pop up now and then.
Yes, I agree. It's also a great instrument. The acoustic guitar, as the piano, is a great instrument to go with dialogue because
Mm.
it allows the dialogue to still come through because of the characteristic of the sound. The color sometimes, of course, has a certain mood that it evokes, and it's quite versatile. The guitar can play the harmony, can play the melody, so it can be the main theme for a character, and
Mm.
can also play quite low, so it can play the bass and the electric guitar as well.
Like I mentioned before, that was kind of what was refreshing hearing in your music is using this wide array of instruments. I mean, you have some that are piano centric, guitar centric, violin centric, and then, you have a few tracks that are even much more kind of modern electronic sounding too. There was one I listened to, I can't remember if it was I Am Charlie or L'Enfant de Darche. My French is non-existent, so it sounds awful, but it was very different. So it was great hearing that versatility.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Marcus. I think for as film composers, it's an important tool to have, or it's also one of the things I really enjoy about being a film composer is that very often you will need some different languages, like let's call it that way, different colors. So sometimes it's just best to tell the story or just helps the story best if it's best a big orchestra. And then yet again, it might just be an acoustic guitar that just fits. And I think this is one of the great things about being a film composer because you just need to keep on your toes all the time. And I had to learn how to write heavy metal for it. Right? It's the theory of music is like physics, right? If you understand it, you can study and construct these different styles, whether it's heavy metal or deep house or pop music or orchestral music. So that's one of the exciting aspects of the life of a film score, I suppose.
Well, it's so necessary because you do get some composers who they have their style and they stick with it, but those tend to be ones who are huge names already and their style is quite iconic. You have Philip Glass. You know exactly what you're getting when Philip Glass composes a score, but it's Philip Glass, so he can do that. Other composers, yeah, you need the versatility and to be able to jump into any project across genre. That said, I know that you've done sci-fi, horror, drama, and now you're working in fantasy. I mean, is there any one of those genres that was tougher to approach?
I think comedy is usually a tricky one. I find that comedy is sometimes difficult to score just because it's a very fine line. I think it's just about getting the right amount of funny and not going over the top. So that is probably challenging. Sometimes really it's discovering the language for a film. That's at the start of a project. That's what usually, well, I personally, with a filmmaker will look for the language. And that can sometimes be challenging because you try different approaches and then you find one and then you can move on. And sometimes it takes a few approaches. You need, to keep going. And at other times, I think that was the case with Cloudweaver. You find it rather quickly. That's another challenge. You just keep going and keep coming up with new ideas until you feel this is the right approach. And I once had was a small sort of class, I don't know how to call it, lecture by the great James Newton Howard. And I was really surprised. He was talking to us about, what are they called? The fantastic beasts and how to find them, I think.
Where to find them?
And,
Yeah.
where to find them, exactly. And I think the amount of music that he has written for the main theme, it was just mind-boggling. I don't recall if it's 20, 30, 40, I don't know. It's a huge amount of cues or attempts that he created for the main theme until they finally felt that it was the right one, that was the right fit. And I guess you just need to come up with new ideas and not get discouraged, I suppose is the right way to put it.
I think you touched on this earlier of the constraints of composing for film, or maybe not constraints, but the fact that it's the collaborative process and you as the composer don't have the final say. I mean, that has to be tough to write something that obviously you think is good enough and is fitting for the scene or the character or a given motif, and to have someone say, no, that's not right for this, change this and go back to the drawing board.
Yes, certainly. Sometimes, and I'm sure in a collaborative process, this is the same for many creatives. If you work in a team or with a director, sometimes you fall in love with the theme you write and you're just sitting there and hoping that this will make it, this will make the cut. But sometimes it doesn't, which is, I think, a normal part of the job. But I often find that the director, a good director, just has the vision for it. And I often found that going back to the drawing board and and redoing the score or a particular cue with more of the guidance by the filmmaker. Actually, after that, you say, yeah, I can see that the new version is actually working better. You still have that music, you can release it, you can produce it, but very often I found it actually working with good filmmakers takes the music to the next level, because you just say, oh, right, yeah, that really fits better. Sometimes you wouldn't agree, but I've had good experiences with that actually it helps you write better music, more suitable music for the film.
That makes sense. If you're a fiction writer, for instance, you have an editor who's doing the same thing, telling you to get rid of something, telling you to add something else. And yeah, in the process, you can say, oh, no, screw this person. This is my work. I know I'm the writer. I'm the composer. I know what I'm doing. But when you get to the other side, yeah, you can see, as long as you have the open mind, that the collaboration worked better. So that's very interesting. That's good to hear.
Yes, yeah, it's good to see that there is a sort of a parallel of this in the writing world where you have the editor that looks at it from a different perspective, and I suppose sometimes gives you something to think about it you haven't considered. It might be constructive criticism is sometimes hard to take, but it can be very beneficial.
Absolutely, 100% agree. Yeah, so with all these projects in your pocket now and this new one coming out, reflecting on all that, I mean, what would be your dream project going forward?
Ooh. You mean an ultimate goal where I would be in 5 years' time or 10 years' time or so?
It could be that, or you could pick a director in a genre and in a genre of film and a style of music that would be perfect, or where you hope you're going to be in 5-10 years. I mean, anything, whichever comes to your mind from that question.
All right. So I think in terms of filmmakers, I've worked with several filmmakers repeatedly, which we had a very fruitful collaboration, and so I'm looking forward to working with these people again. And it's often a mutual thing, and so I'm looking forward to the pandemic sort of coming to an end, so that film production can pick up. Because of course there are a few projects that I should have been writing for as we speak, which haven't even started shooting. So that was. Of course, an unfortunate consequence not for myself, but I'm sure for many filmmakers or film composers. In terms of dream project, good animation. So I hope there's more of that coming, because it's a genre I quite like. So I'm a big fan of Disney, and I've just watched something on Disney Plus, I think 2 days ago, the sequel to Wreck-It Ralph. Ralph Breaks the Internet. I don't know if you've seen it.
I haven't yet. I actually, you know what? I think I saw you tweeting about it, how much you liked it.
Yes, that's right. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I really like this, and with a great score. Maybe the score not quite as prominent as in some other Disney films.
What is it about animation then that draws you over everything else?
That's a good question. I think maybe, Marcus, the fairy tale aspect of it, and then telling these often very inspiring, motivating stories, about friendship or like Coco, the power of music. I think the topics are just beautiful, and I also think the scores for Disney films is just amazing. Yeah, I'm just not a huge fan of Disney films, but also of many scores for these films like Nemo or WALL-E or Coco by Michael Giacchino. The Incredibles and all sorts of forth. Pixar and Disney are just marvelous. Big fan.
I think the themes of the messages are also important. I mean, especially now in a time of just a lot of pessimism. They get the biggest, best names in every aspect to come in, and score in particular.
Absolutely, yes. And I've just actually watched The Lion King for the first time before I watched Ralph Breaks the Internet, which was a wonderful score with wonderful songs as well by Sir Elton John. So all in all, a wonderful film. I thought the original as the remake. I thought they're both beautiful pieces of storytelling. And any of you viewers or readers haven't watched that yet, then yes, I highly recommend it.
I haven't seen the new version of it yet either. But yeah, I mean, yes. Hans Zimmer's scores for both are really good. I mean, his score for the originals, a groundbreaking score, considered one of his best, and I think for someone with the resume that he has, you might not expect it, but I mean, it's such a good medium to work in.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. You're right. It's sort of maybe not his usual to go and score a fairy tale like Lion King, for which I think he won the Oscar. And remember, again, BAFTA organized, they organize these composer talks, and they do a lot of great stuff for young filmmakers. And so it brought Hans into one of these chats about a year and a half ago. I can't remember, a while back, and he was already talking about the Lion King, the remake coming. I was like, oh, and that was great to hear.
I bet.
Unfortunately, it's turned out a really enjoyable chat.
It has
I
been.
would love to continue.
If everything goes well, there will be a spot for you to come back on, and hopefully by then, productions will be back up and running, and there will be all sorts of new scores that you've done or that you're working on that you can talk about too.
Yes, yeah, it would be a pleasure. And then hopefully no pandemic around us.
Let's hope not. All right, well, once again, I really appreciate you coming on. It was great chatting to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Marcus, thank you very much for this chat.
Thank you too. You have a great rest of your day and an even better weekend.
Yes, and you. And greetings to Chicago.
And greetings to London. I was supposed to visit there, I think, 3 times this year, and instead I'm not going at all.
Of course. Oh, well, I do hope that you do come. And if you do come, give me a shout. It's good to meet via video, but even better to meet, be it social distancing or not, in person over a cup of coffee.
Yeah, absolutely. So next time I come, I'll let you know in advance.
Please do. Yes, please do. We'll keep in touch.
All right, great. You take care.
Any, Marcus.